I was working the night shift at a train station in Amsterdam when an American couple walked up to my counter. They had tickets for the 23:45 train to Berlin. The guy looked at his phone, then at me, and said with complete confidence, "We're 3 hours early. The ticket says 11:45. I blinked. "Sir, it's currently 23:30. Your train leaves in 15 minutes, his wife jumped in. No, it says 11:45. That's PM, right? We still have time for dinner." I pointed at the departure board where 23:45 was clearly displayed. "This is 24-hour time. 11 p.m. is 23 sur. Your train leaves in 14 minutes now." They both stared at me like I'd just spoken ancient Greek. The husband pulled out his phone calculator and started doing math out loud. So if noon is 12, and you add 12 more hours. Meanwhile, their train was literally pulling into the platform behind them. They missed it. They had to buy new tickets for the next morning, all because they couldn't process that most of Europe doesn't use AM and PM. I break down moments like this every week, not to mock travelers, but to decode how different logic systems shape behavior. If that kind of cultural analysis interests you, you'll want to stay connected. But that's just the beginning. My cousin works at a rental car agency in Ireland. An American tourist came in, signed all the papers, and headed to the parking lot. 5 minutes later, he stormed back inside, visibly angry. The car is broken. The steering wheel is on the wrong side. My cousin explained, very patiently, that Ireland drives on the left side of the road, so the steering wheel is on the right side of the car. Standard practice in the UK, Ireland, Malta, Cyprus. The tourist wasn't having it. But how am I supposed to drive it? This is dangerous. I want a normal car. My cousin tried to explain that this was normal here, and that he'd signed a document acknowledging he understood local driving laws. The man demanded a refund, called the car defective, and eventually just took a taxi everywhere for his entire trip. He left a 1-star review saying the rental company tried to scam him with backwards vehicles. One more before we dive deeper. A friend of mine manages a small hotel in Prague. An American guest called the front desk at 2 a.m. furious. "Your walls are paper thin. I can hear everything from the next room. People are being way too loud." My friend apologized and said she'd send someone to check. She went upstairs herself. The halls were completely silent. She knocked on the neighboring rooms. Everyone was asleep. Turns out the guest had opened his window. What he was hearing was people talking and laughing on the street below. Normal Friday night activity in a European city center. He genuinely thought the sounds were coming through the walls because he couldn't imagine that Europeans just exist outside at night. He demanded a room change to a quieter floor. My friend moved him to a higher floor, and he finally stopped complaining. These aren't isolated incidents. There's a pattern here, and it's not about intelligence. It's about logic systems. Europeans grow up with different frameworks for time, measurement, roads, and social norms. Americans grow up with their own. When those systems collide, chaos happens. Let's talk about why. I worked as a receptionist at a doctor's office in Berlin for 2 years. We had a lot of international patients. One day, an American man called to confirm his appointment. I told him, "Yes, you're scheduled for the 15th of June. He paused. "Wait, June 15th or the 15th of June?" I was confused. "Those are the same thing?" "No," he said, sounding frustrated. "Is it 6:15 or 15:06? Then it clicked. He was reading a date format. In Germany, we write dates as day, month, year. So 15/06/2024 means the 15th of June. In America, they write month, day, year. So 6.15/2024 also means June 15th, but the numbers are flipped. He'd seen his appointment card, which said 15/06, and thought it meant the 6th of January, 2015. He'd missed 3 appointments because he thought they were all in the past. We had to rewrite all his paperwork in American format just so he'd show up on time. Another time, I was helping an American tourist buy cold medicine at a pharmacy in Amsterdam. She asked if the medicine was safe. I said, "Yes, take 2 tablets. Don't exceed 4 grams in 24 hours." She looked at the box. "This says 400 milligrams per tablet. How many is that in normal measurements?" I explained that milligrams are normal measurements. 1,000 milligrams equals 1 gram. So 2 tablets is 800 milligrams. She'd need to take 5 tablets to hit 4 grams, which is the daily maximum. She stared at me blankly. "Can you just tell me in ounces?" I had no idea how to convert medication dosage to ounces. That's not how medicine works anywhere in the world, except maybe in her head. She ended up not buying it because she didn't trust the math. My brother is a tour guide in Italy. He once had a group of Americans in Florence during summer. It was 32 degrees Celsius. One woman kept complaining that the tour company lied about the weather. "Your website said it'd be in the 30s. This isn't 30 degrees. It's way hotter than that." My brother explained that Europe uses Celsius, not Fahrenheit. 32 Celsius is about 90 Fahrenheit. That's exactly the summer heat she should expect in Italy. She accused him of trying to confuse her on purpose. "Why can't you just use normal degrees?" She genuinely believed Celsius was some kind of European conspiracy to make tourists uncomfortable. I'll give you another one. A guy I know works at a gas station in the Netherlands. An American tourist pulled up, filled his tank, and came inside to pay. When he saw the price, he lost his mind. 200 euros? For gas? This is highway robbery. My friend calmly explained that gas is sold per liter here, not per gallon. 1 gallon is about 3.8 liters. So yes, it's more expensive than in the US. But the math checks out. The tourist didn't believe him. He insisted the pump was broken. He threatened to call the police. My friend had to pull up a conversion chart on his phone to prove that the price was correct. Even after seeing it, the guy muttered, "This is why I hate Europe," and paid. But the time thing is the worst. I was at a restaurant in Vienna once. An American family came in and asked what time the kitchen closed. The waiter said, 22 hours. The dad looked at his watch. "So 10 o'clock at night?" The waiter nodded. "Yes, 2200 hours." The dad turned to his family. "We have 2 hours." It was 20:30. They had 90 minutes, not 2 hours. But he'd done the math wrong because he kept trying to convert 2200 hours into 12-hour time and got confused. They ordered appetizers, took their time, ordered mains. At 21:50, they tried to order dessert. The kitchen was closed. The dad was furious. "You said 22 hours. It's only 9:50. The waiter pointed at the clock. "Sir, it's 10 minutes to 10 p.m. We close at 10. The dad genuinely didn't understand. He thought 22 hours meant 22 hours from now, not 2200 hours on a 24-hour clock. He left a bad review saying the restaurant uses confusing military time to trick tourists. Here's one more that lives in my head rent-free. A woman from Texas was visiting friends in Sweden. She wanted to bake cookies. She found a recipe online. It said to set the oven to 180 degrees. She set it to 180 Fahrenheit. That's about 82 Celsius. Barely warm. Her cookies didn't bake. They just sat there, slowly melting into sad puddles. Her Swedish friend came into the kitchen and immediately saw the problem. "You need to set it to 180 Celsius. That's about 350 Fahrenheit. The Texan was offended. Why would anyone use Celsius for baking? Fahrenheit is more precise. Her friend pointed out that the entire world except the US uses Celsius, and they all manage to bake just fine. The Texan wasn't convinced. She refused to use the oven again and just bought cookies from a store for the rest of her trip. These aren't just small misunderstandings. They're full logical breakdowns. Americans are so used to their systems that when they encounter a different one, their brains short-circuit. This is the kind of context I focus on. How culture quietly rewires logic itself. I publish insights like this weekly for people who prefer understanding over outrage. And instead of adapting, they assume the other system is wrong. I used to work at a tourist information center in Brussels. Part of my job was helping people figure out how to get around Europe. One day, an American couple came in with a printed map of Europe. They pointed at Brussels and then at Paris. How long does it drive take? I told them about 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on traffic. The woman looked shocked. That's it. I thought Europe was bigger. I asked what she meant. She pulled out her phone and showed me a map where Europe and the US were side by side, same size. See? Europe is huge. I had to explain that map projections distort size. The Mercator projection, which most Americans grow up with, makes countries near the equator look smaller and countries near the poles look bigger. Europe is actually much smaller than the continental US in total land area. She didn't believe me. But on the map, I pulled up a true size comparison website. When you drag the US over Europe, it covers a huge chunk. Texas alone is bigger than France. Alaska is bigger than most of Western Europe combined. Her husband went quiet, stared at the screen, and finally said, "So we can't drive to all the countries in 1 week?" They'd planned a road trip: Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Netherlands, and Switzerland in 7 days. They thought it was like driving through a few neighboring states. I had to break it to them that this would be closer to driving from New York to California and back. With way more border crossings and language changes, they ended up canceling half their plans and just stayed in Belgium and France. But they were genuinely upset that Europe wasn't laid out better for tourists. Another time, I was giving a walking tour in Athens. An American tourist asked me, "So, is this where Aristotle debated Plato about democracy?" I said, "Well, not exactly in this spot, but yes, Athens is where a lot of ancient philosophy happened." He nodded confidently. Right. And this was all part of the Roman Empire, correct?" I gently corrected him. Athens was Greek. It was part of the Roman Empire eventually, but it was a Greek city-state long before that. Aristotle and Plato were Greek philosophers, not Roman. He looked confused. But isn't it all the same thing? Rome, Greece, Italy? I explained that Greece and Rome were separate civilizations with different languages, cultures, and governments. Yes, Rome conquered Greece, but they were not the same. He still didn't get it. He kept calling everything Roman ruins for the entire tour, even when standing in front of the Parthenon. I gave up correcting him. A bartender friend in Dublin once had an American ask him, "Do you speak Irish here, or is it just English?" My friend said, "We speak English mostly, but Irish Gaelic is also an official language." The American nodded. Cool. So, is that similar to Scottish? My friend explained that Irish and Scottish Gaelic are related but different languages, like Spanish and Portuguese. Similar roots, but not mutually intelligible. The American thought for a second and then said, "Got it. So it's like how British English and American English are different." My friend tried to explain that no, those are dialects of the same language, while Irish and Scottish Gaelic are entirely different languages. The guy didn't see the distinction. He genuinely thought accents and entirely separate languages were the same level of difference. Here's a painful one. I was at a cafe in Paris. An American tourist asked the waiter, "Is the Eiffel Tower close to the Louvre?" The waiter said, "Not too far. Maybe 30 minutes walking, or you can take the metro." The tourist frowned. Why don't they just move one of them closer? Seems like bad city planning. The waiter stared at him. I stared at him. The whole cafe went quiet. The tourist was serious. He thought Paris should relocate a 130-year-old iron monument or a former royal palace-turned-museum to make sightseeing more convenient. The waiter just said, "We'll keep that in mind," and walked away. I also heard a story from a hostel worker in Prague. An American guest asked, "Why does everyone here speak such good English?" The worker said, "Most people in Prague learn English in school. It's common in Europe." The guest seemed surprised. "But don't you guys have your own language?" The worker confirmed, "Yes, check." But we also learn English, and often German, or another language. The guest was amazed. Wow! In America, we only need English because everyone speaks it. The worker didn't know how to respond to that. The guest genuinely thought learning multiple languages was unnecessary and extra, not realizing that most Europeans grow up bilingual or trilingual out of necessity. Then, there's the classic story from a train conductor in Switzerland. An American passenger asked, "If I take this train, will I go through Germany, France, or Italy?" The conductor said, "Depends on your route." "Where are you headed?" The passenger said, "I don't know. I just want to see mountains." The conductor explained that Switzerland has mountains everywhere, and depending on the train, you might pass through areas where people speak German, French, Italian, or Roman chars. The passenger was confused. "Wait, so Switzerland has 4 languages?" The conductor nodded. The passenger said, "Why don't you just pick one?" That question lives in my head forever. The idea that a country should just pick one language because having multiple is inconvenient for tourists is such a perfectly American thing to say. These moments happen because Americans are used to a massive country where almost everyone speaks English, uses the same measurement system, follows the same basic laws, and shares similar cultural norms. Europe is dozens of countries, languages, and histories crammed into a smaller space. It's a fundamentally different logic, and when Americans don't prepare for that, the confusion is real. I worked at a grocery store in Copenhagen for a summer. An American tourist came through my checkout line with a cart full of groceries. Everything rang up. I told him the total. He handed me his card, then just stood there, staring at me. I waited. He waited. Finally, he said, "Aren't you going to bag this?" I looked at the pile of groceries. "We don't bag here. You can buy a bag if you want, or bring your own." He was stunned. "You're serious? You don't bag groceries?" I explained that in Denmark and most of Europe, you bag your own groceries. It's faster, more efficient, and reduces waste. Cashiers ring things up. You pack. He muttered something about customer service being dead, and awkwardly shoved items into a bag he bought from me. He left annoyed. I saw him leave a complaint card on his way out. Another time, I was having coffee at a cafe in Vienna. An American woman at the next table kept waving at the waiter, snapping her fingers, trying to get his attention. He ignored her. She got louder. Still nothing. Finally, she stood up and walked to the counter, visibly frustrated. "Excuse me, I've been trying to get service for 10 minutes. "This is ridiculous," the waiter calmly said. "When you're ready to order or pay, you come to us. We don't hover. You're free to sit as long as you like." She didn't understand. In the US, waiters check on you constantly. In much of Europe, especially Austria and France, that's considered intrusive. You sit, you relax, you wave when you need something. The waiter isn't ignoring you. They're respecting your space. She thought it was bad service. She left no tip. Which brings me to the next thing. A friend of mine worked at a restaurant in London. An American family finished their meal, paid the bill, and left a 20% tip in cash. My friend thanked them, but they seemed confused. The dad asked, "Wait, do you guys not tip here?" My friend explained that tipping in the UK isn't mandatory like in the US. Staff get paid actual wages, not $2 an hour plus tips. Tipping is appreciated but not expected, and usually much smaller, like 10% or rounding up. The dad was shocked. "So we didn't have to tip?" My friend assured him it was kind, but no, not required. The mom turned to her family. "We've been tipping everywhere. We've probably overpaid by hundreds of dollars." They weren't mad, just amazed. They genuinely didn't know that the U.S. tipping culture isn't universal. They'd been tipping hotel staff, taxi drivers, bartenders, all at American rates. Everyone appreciated it, but no one expected it. Here's a quieter one. My neighbor in Germany is American. She moved here for work. One Sunday, she decided to vacuum her apartment at 9 a.m. Within 20 minutes, someone knocked on her door. It was the downstairs neighbor, politely but firmly asking her to stop. She was confused. "It's 9 in the morning." "I'm not being loud." The neighbor explained that in Germany, Sundays are rest days. By law and cultural expectation, you don't do loud chores on Sundays. No drilling, no vacuuming, no mowing. It's called Ruhezeit, quiet time. My American neighbor was baffled. "What if I need to clean?" The neighbor suggested she do it Saturday or a weekday evening before 10 p.m. My neighbor thought this was absurd, but she stopped vacuuming. She later told me it felt like living under cleaning laws, which I guess technically it is. I also know someone who works at a pharmacy in Stockholm. An American tourist came in looking for cold medicine. She asked if she needed a prescription. My friend said, "For some medications, yes." "What do you need?" The tourist named a common American over-the-counter decongestant. My friend explained that in Sweden, even some basic medications require a pharmacist consultation or prescription because they contain pseudoephedrine, which is controlled. The tourist was outraged. "It's just cold medicine. Why is everything so complicated here?" My friend explained that it's to prevent misuse and ensure safety. The tourist left without buying anything, saying she'd just suffer through it, as if asking a pharmacist a question was some unbearable burden. Then there's the shoe thing. I can't tell you how many times I've seen Americans walk into someone's home in Europe with their shoes on. In most European countries, you take your shoes off at the door. It's automatic. It's respect. An American friend of mine visited a colleague's apartment in Oslo. She walked right in with her sneakers on. Her host froze, stared at her feet, and very politely said, "We take shoes off here." My friend was embarrassed. She apologized and took them off. But later, she told me, "I felt like I was being scolded like a child. It's just shoes." I tried to explain that in many cultures, shoes carry dirt from outside, and homes are clean spaces. It's not about scolding. It's about norms. She understood, but she still felt weird about it. One last one. I was on a train in Switzerland. An American tourist was talking loudly on his phone. Everyone in the car was staring at him. In Switzerland and much of Europe, you don't take loud phone calls on public transport. You step outside or you speak quietly. He didn't notice the stares. He kept talking. Finally, an older Swiss man leaned over and said very politely, "Excuse me, could you please lower your voice?" The American looked confused. "I'm not yelling." The Swiss man explained that it's considered rude to talk loudly on trains. The American replied, "It's a public train. I can talk if I want." The Swiss man didn't argue. He just moved to another car. So did several other passengers. The American spent the rest of the ride talking, alone in a half-empty car, not realizing he'd been quietly, socially exiled. These aren't big, dramatic moments. They're small, everyday things, but they add up. Americans are used to a loud, individualistic, convenience-first culture. Europe operates on quieter, community-oriented, tradition-respecting logic. When those two collide, neither side is wrong. They're just speaking different social languages. I want to end with one more story. A guy I went to university with moved to the US for work. He's Danish. After 6 months, he came back to visit and told me this. He was at a grocery store in Minnesota. He grabbed a carton of milk. The price tag said $1.99. He went to the register. The cashier rang it up. The total was $2.14. He was confused. He asked why the price was different. The cashier explained, "Sales tax isn't included in the sticker price." He stood there doing mental math, trying to figure out the percentage. "So how much is the tax?" She said, "Depends on the state and the item." He asked, "Why don't you just include it in the price?" She shrugged. "That's just how we do it here." He told me that moment broke his brain more than anything else about America. Not the tipping, not the healthcare costs, not the car dependency. The fact that the price on the shelf is not the price you pay. That's the thing, though. Every culture has logic that makes perfect sense to the people inside it and seems completely insane to outsiders. Americans think 24-hour time is confusing. Europeans think 12-hour clocks with AM and PM are needlessly complicated. Americans think the metric system is hard. Europeans think Fahrenheit and miles are absurd. Neither side is wrong. They're just different systems. But problems happen when people refuse to adapt, even temporarily, when they assume their way is the only logical way, and everything else is broken. I've told you about Americans struggling in Europe because that's what I see most often. But I've also seen Europeans visit the US and freak out over free refills, tipping culture, and the fact that you can turn right on a red light. Culture shock goes both ways. The difference is preparation. If you know the rules, you adapt. If you don't, you become the person yelling at a train conductor because you didn't understand 24-hour time. And trust me, these stories never stop coming. Every summer, a new wave of tourists arrives. Some do their research. They learn the basics. They ask questions. They adjust. Those people have great trips. Others show up expecting Europe to work exactly like home. They get frustrated, confused, and upset. They leave bad reviews. They go home with stories about how weird or difficult Europe is. But here's the truth. Europe isn't weird. America isn't weird. They're just different. And if you can't handle that, maybe stay home. Or at least learn what 24-hour time is before you miss your train. Because the next time someone asks me why we don't just use normal measurements, I might actually lose it. If cultural logic fascinates you, the way tiny systems reveal entire mindsets, this channel is built exactly for that. Every episode unpacks the signals behind global habits. Subscribe if you value perspective over noise.